So, welcome back to War Thunder and welcome to the second part of the E-100 tank review. Now, a quick update. A few hours after I did the actual tank review and also then uploaded it, Guardian changed the lower plate to 150mm. Same angle, but 150mm. So this also gives you now a quite confident safety against, for example, the 20-pounder with APDS, and also makes it very unlikely that you get easily penetrated there from an L7 APDS. The APFSDS, for example, on the Type 74 might be a bit different, but that's a different topic I will talk about in another video. So first of all, I'm sorry for all the guys that don't want to see an E-100. Watch something else, okay? I have over 500 videos that include not the E-100. You have plenty to watch there. And for all those which want to see this, I keep my promise. I will completely talk you through the stats. And this is what we are going to do. And you will see some nice gameplay here. So I have so much footage lying around that it's going to be really a bit of cherry picking what to show you, but I want to show you the full picture. And again, this is why the tank review has at least 3 parts. I might include certain gameplay and we'll name it part 4 and 5, but it's not really a part of the actual tank review. It's an add-on part later on. So the original tank review will have 3 parts and this is part 2. So let's get right into it. Today's video is sponsored by the Free Eagles app for War Thunder. Download the app in the video description below and use the code shown on screen to get 10 golden eagles right now. Let's begin with the mobility, and we can see we have 900 horsepower. That is, after the Mars, the strongest engine in this comparison, and as I mentioned in part 1, it's the same engine as on the Panther II or the 10.5 centimeter Tiger II. But you have 150 tons to carry around, and that gives you a flat 6.0 horsepower to ton ratio, which is actually less than the one of the Mars by 6.4%. But if you look at all the other tanks, they have more than double the horsepower to ton ratio. In terms of the T10M, well, it's nearly 3 times that. And so your top speed is not quite what you expect. So on a level plane, on a level ground, you of course overtake the Mars. On most occasions you can reach, on flat ground, medium terrain, 24-25 kilometers an hour, and if you have hard terrain you actually can see 30-35 kilometers, and just when you run downhill you get your 40 kilometers an hour top speed, and that is amazing. But tanks like the IS-3 and IS-4 are most likely faster than you, and then also like something like a T10M just behaves like a medium tank. The M103 and the Conqueror have a limited top speed, that is right, but they are on most maps with the ups and downs faster in their firing positions than you are. And the E-100, by the way, does not really excel at long range shooting. It excels at long range shot blocking like you wouldn't believe, especially solid shots and APDS. I mean, I talked to a few people that have something like a Conqueror or a Chieftain, and when they shoot at the E-100 or even a Mouse that is perfectly angled, they have not the best time, let's put it that way. And one shot back, hitting or penetrating the lower places, and you're done. So more on this in a moment. But then we come to the reverse speed, and this is again where we have a significant disadvantage compared to the Mouse. So minus 10 kilometers an hour is actually average compared with all the other tanks except the Mouse. And the Mouse surprises so many people when it just when they try to flank, and you just can reverse in a straight line on flat terrain, for example on abandoned factory. You shrug them off, they just are then in front of you, and you just have their sight to blast them into the next match. For both tanks, the 100 and the Mouse, you have neutral steering, unlike, for example, the Russian tanks. And the the quintessence in the maneuverability. So we have covered the mobility going from A to B, the maneuverability in a brawling fight. The E-100 has, when it comes to changing direction, a bit of an advantage compared to the mouse. First of all, when you reach higher speeds, suddenly you seem to float a little bit. You really can you can really turn very sharply, but it's more drifting, and it's just absurd if you think about 150 tons drifting, much like the mouse in arcade when you're full speed and you are on soft terrain. Yeah, the ground just cannot deal with your weight. You have better maneuverability than the mouse, especially when you want to come around the corner. The mouse is very long, you need a lot of gear shifting, the driver can't keep up with the perfect gear for the perfect situation, and so the mouse really struggles a little bit in maneuvering, and it needs more time than the E-100. And in certain situations, it's just this little bit more that gives the E-100 the advantage. Also, in pointing the gun at the target, which is also important because you have a very slow turret rotation speed and no gun stabilizer and a long reload, all the good stuff. So to snatch in those, or to throw in those shots is difficult with the E-100 and the mouse. So they are apart from each other quite distinctively, but compared to other tanks like the M103, the Conqueror, and the Russian heavy tanks, you have a damn hard time. And so that puts you quite in certain positions where you cannot really say, okay, the mouse has clearly the advantage or the E-100 has the advantage. It can, within a situation, change from being in the E-100 being of advantage, also being in the mouse being in an advantage. I think both tanks have their favorable situations, or where they perform better. And this is where some people just say, yeah, the E-100 is better, because they don't see the downsides or don't even know the full capacity of the mouse. So keep that in mind. Now let's have a look at the firepower, and we can see in this comparison that the E-100 together with the mouse has the biggest caliber with the KWK-44. And you can see just by the ammunition count for the 128 the great difference in the real tank loadout. So the 100 was clearly designed as more of a heavy tank, whereas the mouse was more of a stationary bunker to fill frontline gaps. And you know, for a heavy tank, you can more or less refill it. You know, it retreats from the front line, you fill it up with fuel and ammunition, then send it back to the front line. That's the idea. A bunker, especially when in a attack from Soviet forces, can get surrounded. Now the mouse has also the armor layout to withstand it, much like the 100, but we saw the differences. But the pure ammunition count tells you a great deal. We have big shells with big propellant charges. They need up room, especially when we compare it to all the other tanks. For the IS-4, T-10M, M103 and Conqueror, they, well, are ranging from 30 to 35 rounds. The 100 has 42 rounds and the mouse whopping 68, which is nearly double of that of all other tanks. And so if you then think about how many rounds you can take into battle with the mouse in T100 to have the ammunition from the turret removed, you just end up with the 100 for 19 rounds, which is less than half of its total ammunition count, but greatly enhances the survivability. The reload, well, it is not as bad as the IS-4 with 20.8, and that is really a downside of the IS-4M. But 18.2 seconds is not really that great, especially when we compare it to M103 and Conqueror, which are around about the same battle rating. Conqueror is 7.3 and M103 is 7.7 if I'm not mistaken, and they have 18% less reload time. The turret rotation speed is also very, very bad. We have 8 degrees per second. That is very slow, especially if we compare it with the M103 that has practically 3 times the turret rotation speed, you know, so that's quite something. And also we have Well, I made here a bit of a mistake with the percentage, but you kind of see the big differences. Again, even the IS-4M is better, and again, in conjunction with the bad maneuverability, you kind of see where it's going. The gun depression is actually pretty okay, minus 7 degrees. You're not a ridgeline fighter in the first place, because of your limited maneuverability. You know, you need to fight on flat ground. And we are not done yet. So 23 degrees of gun elevation is the best, but it's not really that important except if you want to snipe down planes. Again, poor turret traverse. The elevation speed is actually pretty normal with 4 degrees per second, and in conjunction with your gun depression, it's actually pretty okay. So you will never actually feel a lack of gun elevation speed. It's quite okay. However, this is just about the 128, and the 128 is just, when we then later on look at the ammunition, not the very best weapon choice or the very best gun. Again, not the fastest reload, bad gun handling stats overall, very sluggish, and it just isn't that brutal onslaught gun. However, if you look at a tank like the Conqueror, on paper it looks so much better. Faster reload, and also the turret being stronger, so in a hull down position, the Conqueror should excel. And this is where then reality comes in. First of all, the Conqueror's APDS is one of the worst shells in the game. It has great penetration, great muzzle velocity and all that stuff, and good normalization. Way better than the E-100 or a mouse. But it is so extremely unreliable. I've just recently played the Conqueror for personal revisiting purposes to refresh if it has been buffed or fixed or whatever. No, it hasn't. It's god awful. And also the M103 has some issues. I mean, the stock shell got buffed, both in post-penetration damage effect with the huge spalling effect that you also will find on the American T-34 tank. And also the penetration has been increased from previously around about 280 to now 303 at point blank range. So that is better. However, the 100 and the mouse, much like the T10M with its stock shell and the IS-4 with its armor-piercing shells, have the great capacity of the APHE effect. And that is just something different. That is just about the main gun. And now we come to the secondary gun. Now I have no stats for those, but the reload is around about 3 seconds on an ace crew. It's much like a strapped-on Panzer 3N, the premium tank. It's just very rapid firing. And the key to having success with the mouse and T100, and also in terms of long-term survivability, is the 75mm. Many people look at this gun and just don't realize how potent this gun is. I repeat it on and on and on. The magic about the mouse and the E-100 is not the armor, not the mobility, not the main gun, it's the 75. It's an outstanding feature that at that battle rating no other tank has, which you will find on lower tier tanks where people don't know how to set up the settings, they forget about the tanks, something like the SMK gets forgotten, the secondary gun is not that useful compared to the 75 on the E-100/mouse. So this is something that I really have to hammer into your minds, both for mouse and E-100 drivers, because that greatly enhances the game experience and fully reveal the insane potential of both tanks. But now let's just do the shell comparison for the 128 and also the 75. So let's talk about the shells in comparison, and we can see that the 128mm is pretty average compared to the competition, both in penetration and muzzle velocity. It's kind of average, but let's just put it into perspective. The great damage dealing shell of the mouse and E-100 is the 128mm main armament, of course, but there is a quite nice conjunction with the 75mm, which again I have to repeat how important it is. I will do this multiple times again because I have to just point it out, because I say it and people just forget about it and they think, yeah, 128 it is. But you can see the gun, the penetration is kind of average. It is just stronger than the IS-4M, but not as strong as the T-10M and the M103. The M103 can much more reliable deal with Soviet medium tanks, in particular from the front, whereas you, at their 100mm plates from the front at the 60 degrees angle, have a 50-50 chance of going through. If you go through, you most likely kill them, unless you hit the fuel tank that absorbs all the damage effect. For the IS-4M, it has the great benefit of not having to deal with the Russian tanks, and it can, well, penetrate every tank at a certain point that it actually can aim at, because the scope on the IS-4M is so much more better than on the Maus and the E-100. So the optimal magnification for the scope on the Maus and D100 would be somewhere between where it is currently and also between the magnification on the Jagdtiger, which is too strong. Okay, so it's damn hard to get used to the difference. Then there is the TNT equivalent, and that is second to none. 786.5 grams of TNT equivalent is outright overkill, no doubt about this. It's fantastic. So you can absolutely flood the fighting compartment of any enemy tank with the shrapnels and outright one-shot it. Something, even in an arcade, something like the Jagdtiger, another Maus / E-100, you just will outright kill it. Okay? And furthermore, you can snipe cupolas, for example on the Conqueror. I love to do that. It's always a safe kill. He cannot really go hull down because of the limited gun depression and so on. The muzzle velocity is okayish. It's slower than on the Long 88 with 1,000 meters around about of muzzle velocity. 1,000 meters per second, so 930 is not too bad. Again, it's the magnification of the scope that really makes it difficult to long-range snipe. The HE is a story for its own. Now, previously it was much more reliable to splash, for example, the turret front of a Soviet medium tank and then just go through the roof of the fighting compartment, which is around about 30mm thick, and just one-shot the tank, which is more reliable against, for example, the T-54-47 than the actual APHE trying to get the cupola or the turret front. It's, you know, rolling with the dice. Then also we can see the 75 has an HE shell, but that's outright pointless. So on the E-100 we also have no APDS, no APCR, no APFSDS, no APHEDS, FSDS, whatever. And that's actually, we have just two shell types for the E-100 / the Maus, much like on the IS-4M. Where it gets now really outstanding is the additional heat shell for the Maus / the E-100 on the 75mm. We have multiple shell types. In total we have 4 shell types for the 75, and let me just have a quick look into it. The stock heat shell is okay with 80mm of penetration, so with 2 hits you can track an enemy tank. You need 1 hit on the muzzle brake to wreck the gun, the main gun of an enemy tank. You can trick them out of cover. They drive sideways on because they thought you fired your main gun, and now they count on the long reload, but your 128mm is still up there and you blast them into the next match. And then we have the problem of the penetration. 80mm is good enough to deal with something like the side of a M103 for the engine compartment or the rear, but not good enough for the Soviet medium tanks, which have either side skirts, for example the T-44-100, or 80mm side armor like the T-54-47. And the Hochladungsgranate 38C, which is a tier 2 upgrade, is actually more important to get than the Panzergranate 43, which is the upgraded APHE shell for the 128mm. Please keep that in mind. And with the 100mm of penetration, much like on the Hochladungsgranate 38B, which is the stock heat shell, you can also hull break a lot of the AAA vehicles, and for example also the ZC-57-2. You can penetrate it with the 128mm and not hull break it for some bizarre reason, but the 75mm will do. Strange, but this is it, how it is. Furthermore, we have also a smoke shell, and now we have to also say that the smoke shell is absolutely important to get. You can rapidly smoke up enemy ATGM positions, sniping positions of enemy tanks. You can smoke up your own path into an enemy cap circle. You can smoke up enemy positions so that they have to drive out to have a shot at you, which then results in them coming at you one by one. And you can establish crossfire with your team. You can smoke up your own teammates which got hit and have to repair, and so you can annoy the living hell out of enemies. Yes, those mentioned shells cost quite some bit, 190 civil lines. It's not the single shell cost that is quite expensive, but if you fire 30, 40 in one battle, it adds up. So this is something that you have to take in mind. For that, you get a first glimpse at how it works with the 75mm. And you also have a smoke launcher on the tank itself, but it fires backwards, so you smoke up your rear, so it doesn't fire in the front like a Tiger II, for example. So yeah, I think this has been quite some discussion, and to really know what I'm talking about, I showed you all the gameplay, and I just want then to show you some scenes right now. So at the end, I still have one gameplay for you that I will comment on, and this is not the best gameplay that I had. In fact, it is quite comical because it shows misplay by the rest of my team, by the enemy tanks in particular, and you kind of then see the advantages and disadvantages of the E-100. So now here in this capture zone, we have no access to it, so I want to capture it. There is not a lot of backup for me, in fact just one tank. They just took out quite some tanks, and I have absolutely no idea who is actually in the capture zone. And this is something that you do not really want to do. You do not want to get into a position that is unknown. And there I saw it. I saw the enemy tank, and he either heard me or he just went around after he spotted me. So yeah, I see him coming, and I execute him actually by a shot trap. This was one of the rare occasions where I actually had to kill one. And oh look, there is an IS-6. And there we can see now the magic of the side skirts, because the Russian tanks are too small to actually go under it or next to it, because it's their choice to brawl. And that was actually a shot that was very deeply satisfying into the cupola of the IS-6. He actually executed himself by doing this maneuver. So again, IS-6 drivers very often think they have easy game with certain tanks because they do it all the same. And there is another one. It's quite comical. So I want to get distance, and then I block him. He just slammed it at an extreme angle into the turret front, and watch this. Yep. That shell set the enemy tank on fire, but didn't kill him, and just killed 2 of his 4 crew members, so he's still very much alive. He extinguished the fire, and yeah, I have all the time in the world to reload, and I still want to block him a little bit with my hull, and there you can see how long it takes with the gun handling, and I just fire when he stops for quite some time. So that were 3 very comical kills, I'd say. But again, it was massive misplay by the enemies. They didn't pay attention, they were overconfident, and they actually executed themselves by making those stupid approaches, which I would never do against any kind of tank. Yes, I am so much better than the Conqueror and the M103 in this respect, but they're not really, you know, heavy tanks. They're more like gun carriers. More on this, or about this topic, on the channel of Many Miles Away. So there is a BMP-1, and he just penetrated the side of my turret and damaged the gun breech. I cannot fire with the main gun, and yeah, I take the risk getting into position, and he just takes too long, and I just, well, hull break him with the 75. You kind of see I would have needed a lot of time to repair the main gun, which at least would take 20, even 30 seconds right now, because I'm down to just 4 crew members. And by that time he could have damaged it even more, set me on fire from the rear, and all the good stuff. So please take this into account. So now I captured the zone, I did everything that I could, I have 4 kills under my belt, and I just move on. And yeah, to alternate between the smoke shell and the heat shell, to not forget about this in the heat of the battle, is very important. And I just show you now another thing, and that is a surprise tank. Another hull break. In this case it's crew knocked out, but actively it was a hull break as well. And I still have now the 128. So if just somebody heard or read the kill message and is listening to some music, which can then also result in him not realizing the different gun sounds between the 75 and the 128, just thinks, yeah, it's just fired, you are on a 15-second 18-second cooldown. So I went around the corner, somebody is capturing the zone or entering it, and it's this IS-6, and let's just quickly execute him here. Ah, that feels good. That was actually a shot threat from the rear, and I just got hit here. Doesn't matter, this Kugelblitz is, you know, just standing outside of the capture zone, and now I just have to maneuver in a way that allows me to capture the zone again. Again, it's like we are in the capture zone disadvantage, so I have to get in there. I have no idea what just hit me, but it sounded like heat. I just have a frantic look around, and oh look, it's an object. And he kills my gunner. I'm down to 2 crew members, and I was lucky that I was not further damaged. He dunks up the next shot, and I used this time the main gun to execute him through the objects, because this is very important. You cannot shoot through objects with the 75, although you can remove it and then you have a clear line of sight with the 128, for example. So now I've captured this zone, and for some bizarre reason this guy here shoots me from the rear. I smoked myself up a little bit. I also recruit another crew member while I'm at it to increase my survivability for the next fight. Then I moved on to A, which gets captured, and I looked around, there was nobody coming in. The Kugelblitz is still there, and I saw the enemy tank just right here, and I just couldn't have a shot on him. He just moved around the corner. It's an IS-2. So I just have to get a good shot at him, and this should be pretty easy. However, just in a moment I see a second tank appear, and I get shot from the rear, but not damaged. And I just tracked the enemy tank, and that is an on-toss. Just shooting HESH shell after HESH shell into my back without any effect. I have no idea what to do. Now the main gun is damaged, and I tried to at least hull break the on-toss with the 75, but at this point he is reloaded, and who needs skill? Really, this is what I think about certain American tanks. Who needs skill? There was absolutely nothing that I could do, and it was let down by my team. Ultimately, we lost the battle after I captured at least 2 times zones, was about to challenge another one, and well, there was nothing that I could do. The E-100 heavily relies on teamwork, how to actually use the E-100 and the mouse to their full potential with some ridiculous gameplay. This will be part of part 3 that will follow up in a few days. So thanks for watching, thanks for listening. Please give this video a like if it did, subscribe if you want to see more. Then also leave your comment in the comment section. What do you think about this form of presentation? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Is it too long for your taste or whatnot? And well, then that's finally it for me. So we'll see each other on the battlefields of War Thunder.